My name is Sarah, and I thought I knew everything about betrayal until that Tuesday afternoon in October. I had been away for 3 weeks on a business trip to Tokyo, the longest I'd ever been separated from my husband Mark in our 8 years of marriage. The anticipation of seeing him again had kept me awake during the entire 14-hour flight home. I remember fumbling with my keys at the front door of our suburban home, my heart racing with excitement. The house felt unusually quiet as I stepped inside, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Mark." I called out, but only silence answered back. His car was in the driveway, so I knew he was home. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices coming from inside. My pulse quickened, not from excitement this time but from something else entirely. Something that made my stomach churn. I pushed the door open gently, and what I saw will haunt me forever. There was my husband, shirtless, lying in our bed next to my mother. They were both under the covers, and my mother's clothes were scattered on the floor beside the bed. The scene was so surreal that for a moment I wondered if I was still dreaming on the plane. "Sarah." Mark bolted upright, his face pale as a ghost. My mother, Patricia, pulled the sheets up to her chin, her eyes wide with what looked like terror. But there was something in their expressions that didn't quite match what I was seeing. It wasn't guilt or shame, it was something else entirely. "What the hell is going on here?" I screamed, my voice echoing through the room. The betrayal cut through me like a knife. My own mother, my own husband, in my own bed. The two people I trusted most in this world had destroyed everything I believed in. But as I stood there, shaking with rage and heartbreak, I noticed something odd. There were medical supplies on the nightstand, bandages, antiseptic, and what looked like prescription medication. Mark's chest was wrapped in gauze, and there were dark stains that looked suspiciously like blood seeping through. "Sarah, please," Mark whispered, his voice weak and strained. "Let me explain. It's not what you think. Your mother, she saved my life." If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Saved your life. I laughed bitterly, my voice cracking with emotion. Is that what we're calling adultery now? I couldn't process what Mark was saying. The image of them together was burned into my retinas, and no amount of explanation could erase what I had witnessed. My mother slowly sat up in bed, still clutching the sheet to her chest. "Sarah, honey, please sit down. You need to hear this." Her voice was gentle but urgent, the same tone she used when I was a child and had scraped my knee. "I don't need to hear anything," I shouted, backing toward the door. "I've seen enough. 8 years, Mark. 8 years of marriage, and this is how you repay me? With my own mother." Mark tried to get out of bed, but he winced in pain and collapsed back onto the mattress. That's when I noticed how pale he was, how his breathing seemed labored. The anger in my chest began to mix with confusion. "3 days ago," my mother began, her voice steady despite the chaos, "Mark collapsed in the kitchen. He called me because he couldn't reach you. You were in those back-to-back meetings in Tokyo, remember? When I got here, he was unconscious on the floor, bleeding internally." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process her words. "Bleeding internally? What are you talking about?" "The doctor said it was a ruptured spleen," Mark whispered, his hand pressed against his bandaged torso. "Emergency surgery. They said if your mother hadn't found me when she did, I would have died within hours." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I've been staying here to take care of him, Sarah. He's been too weak to be alone. The medication makes him disoriented and he needs help with everything: eating, bathing, changing his bandages." I felt the room spinning around me. "But why were you both?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I was helping him change his dressings," my mother explained. "The bandages had shifted during the night and he was bleeding through. I had to remove his shirt to assess the wound. That's when you walked in." The pieces were starting to come together, but I was still reeling from the initial shock. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you call me?" Mark's voice was barely audible. "We tried, Sarah. But you were in those crucial negotiations. Your mother said you'd worked too hard for this promotion to have it ruined by rushing home. She promised she'd take care of everything until you got back." The weight of my accusations crashed down on me like a tidal wave. I sank into the chair beside our bed, my legs unable to support me any longer. The betrayal I had felt moments ago was rapidly transforming into something much worse: guilt. "Oh my God," I whispered, covering my face with my hands. Mark, I'm so sorry. But I thought you were. The words died in my throat. My mother reached over and gently touched my arm. Sweetheart, anyone would have thought the same thing. We should have been more careful about how this looked. But I couldn't forgive myself that easily. While my husband was fighting for his life, I was halfway around the world, completely oblivious. While my mother was sacrificing her own comfort to nurse him back to health, I was closing business deals and celebrating with colleagues. The surgery, I managed to ask, how bad was it? Mark shifted uncomfortably in bed. They had to remove my spleen entirely. The internal bleeding was extensive. I lost a lot of blood, Sarah. The doctor said it was touch and go for the first 48 hours. I looked at my mother with new eyes. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her clothes wrinkled from sleeping in hospital chairs and on our living room couch. Mom, you've been here for 3 days straight? She nodded. I couldn't leave him alone. The first night his fever spiked to 104 degrees. I had to call an ambulance. The second night he became delirious from the pain medication and tried to get up to use the bathroom. He nearly tore his stitches. The full picture was becoming clear, and with it came a crushing sense of shame. My mother had stepped in to fill the role I should have been playing. She had held my husband's hand through the worst night of his life while I was toasting my success with sake in a Tokyo restaurant. I should have been here, I said, tears streaming down my face. I should have been the one taking care of you. Mark reached out weakly and took my hand. Sarah, you couldn't have known. And your mother, she was incredible. I don't know what I would have done without her. But as I sat there holding my husband's hand and looking at my exhausted mother, I realized there was still something that didn't add up. Something in their expressions, in the way they looked at each other, suggested there was more to this story than a simple medical emergency. There's something else, isn't there? I asked, studying both their faces carefully. The relief of understanding the medical situation was giving way to a new kind of unease. Something you're not telling me. My mother and Mark exchanged a glance that lasted just a fraction too long. It was subtle, but I caught it. After 8 years of marriage, I knew Mark's tells, and after 32 years as her daughter, I knew my mother's. Sarah, my mother began hesitantly, there's something about Mark's condition that we need to discuss. My heart began to race again. What do you mean? Mark struggled to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. The doctors ran extensive tests while I was in the hospital. The ruptured spleen wasn't random, it was a symptom of something bigger. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Bigger how? I have a rare blood disorder, Mark said quietly. It's called thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. TTP. It causes blood clots to form in small blood vessels throughout the body, which can damage organs. I stared at him, trying to process this information. How long have you known? The doctors suspected it during the surgery, but they confirmed it yesterday. That's why your mother has been so vigilant about monitoring me. TTP can be fatal if not treated properly. My mother leaned forward. Sarah, this condition, it's genetic. There's a hereditary component. What does that mean? Mark took a shaky breath. It means there's a chance our children could inherit it. If we ever have children. The weight of this revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. We had been trying to start a family for 2 years with no success. Now I understood why my mother had been spending so much time researching medical journals on her laptop, why there were genetic counseling pamphlets on the kitchen counter. But there's more, my mother said softly. The doctors want to test immediate family members. They need to understand the genetic markers better. I looked between them, confusion growing. Immediate family members? Sarah, Mark said, his voice barely audible, they need to test you. And they need to test me. But they also need to test. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. My mother completed his thought. They need to test your biological father. The room went silent. My biological father. A man I had never met, whose identity had been a closely guarded secret my entire life. My mother had always told me he was someone from her past who couldn't be part of our lives. Why? I whispered. Because, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. There's something I've never told you about your father. Something I should have told you years ago. My mother stood up slowly, wrapping the sheet around herself like armor. She walked to the window and stared out at the garden where I used to play as a child. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear her. "Your father," she began, "isn't some mysterious stranger from my past. He's someone you know. Someone you've known your entire life." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" She turned to face me, her eyes red with tears. "Sarah, your father is Dr. James Morrison." The name hit me like a physical blow. Dr. Morrison, Mark's father. The man who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding because my own father wasn't there. The man who had been like a father to me for the past 8 years. "That's impossible," I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces were falling into place. The way Dr. Morrison had always treated me like family, even before Mark and I were serious. The way my mother had always been nervous around him at family gatherings. The way they both had the same unusual green eyes that I had inherited. Mark was staring at me in shock. "Sarah, that means we're half-siblings," I finished, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. My mother collapsed back into the chair, sobbing. "I was 19 when I met James. He was in his residency, brilliant and charming. We had an affair, but he was already engaged to Mark's mother. When I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't destroy his future, so I disappeared. I never told him about you." The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my family, it was all a lie. "The genetic testing," Mark said weakly, "it would have revealed everything. The doctors would have seen the familial connection. That's why I've been here," my mother continued. "Not just to take care of Mark, but to figure out how to tell you both the truth before the medical tests exposed everything." I stood up abruptly, my mind reeling. "This means our marriage is illegal," Mark finished. "And any children we might have had." The genetic implications were staggering. The blood disorder, the fertility issues we'd been having, it all made sense now. "We have to tell him," I said, referring to Dr. Morrison. "He has a right to know he has a daughter." My mother nodded through her tears. "I've been carrying this secret for 32 years. I thought I was protecting everyone, but I've only made everything worse." As I sat there trying to process the magnitude of this revelation, I realized that the scene I had walked in on, my mother caring for my husband, had been an act of love, but not the kind I had initially feared. It was the love of a mother-in-law caring for her son-in-law, and unknowingly, a mother caring for her daughter's half-brother. The betrayal I thought I had witnessed was actually the moment when our family's deepest secret was about to be revealed through an act of medical necessity and maternal devotion. Our marriage was over, but not because of infidelity. It was over because it should never have existed in the first place.